Good morning. Again, my name is John. It's an honor and joy to be with you, as always. And I, too, am glad to see this room filled with people because when you think about the couple of years that we've gone through, I travel a lot doing the work that I do, and many faith communities have not survived these days, and the fact that we are here is a testament to you all and to how much you love this place and you love what happens here and in the community because of it. So I celebrate that today. Today's message is actually about mysticism, but if you're into that, if you're not into that sort of thing, run now. So I have a daily planner here. It is intended, to plan my day. Sometimes I will plan for things for a day, and those things will happen on that day. Many times, the things I planned will not happen, and the things that I did not plan will happen. And even if the things I planned did happen, they rarely end up exactly the way I expected them to when I made the plans for those days. There is almost never a reality that matches what was in my head before when I made the plans. And I think my daily planner might be better entitled Daily Surprise Party of the Beautiful and Terrible, depending on who shows up, right? I want you to think about the surprises in your life. When's the last time you had a pleasant surprise? Something positive and unexpected, something that came and brought you joy or made you feel hopeful. Maybe even this week. Can you give me an idea of a pleasant surprise that you got? Yes, nice and loud, and I'll repeat it.
2 hours ago, I found something that I couldn't find, some little beads that I brought back from Venice. And I've been looking for them for days.
So 2 hours ago, you found some beads you had from Venice that you had lost, that you brought back. Fantastic. I love it. Beautiful surprise. Anyone else get a really good surprise this week? Yes.
Someone brought me flowers.
Someone brought you flowers. Excellent. I love that. Yes.
I tasted the leaf from a plant that a friend bought, and it was spearmint.
You tasted the leaf from a plant that a friend had bought, and it was spearmint. Excellent. I'm glad it wasn't poison ivy. Yeah. Well, your tongue would have been really in bad shape. Yes.
About 2 weeks ago, a young man and his wife came to visit me. I knew them, and it was a surprise to me. But what he told me was that he wanted to thank me for a series I taught a long time ago called Who Am I? He was 11 years old. He said he had saved the book all these years. Wow. And it was such a thrill to me to know someone remembered something I did back then.
And how old is he now, do you know?
I think probably 52.
So a young man who was 11 when you met him, and you were his teacher, you gave a lesson, and he remembered it all these years. At 52, he wanted to come and thank you. That is beautiful. Okay, enough of that fun. But now let's get to a less pleasant surprise that you got recently. Something you hadn't seen coming and were not happy to see. That was not a welcome development, maybe just a minor inconvenience, but something that surprised you, and it wasn't great. Harder to share, I know. Yes. You lost the beads again.
I discovered on the way to church that we were about 10 minutes late.
Okay, you discovered that you were on the way to church, that you were about 10 minutes late, and that was you passing me on the road. I saw a hand back here. Yes.
Well, just recently, some of you know, recently I just had to go to the emergency room. And that was a surprise. I've never done that. And the other surprise, I'm doing both of them because I couldn't go unless I could have somebody come in to watch my dog. So this kiddo right here, was a surprise. She said she would come over so I could go. Otherwise, I don't know what would happen because I wouldn't have left.
So you got an unpleasant surprise and an emergency room visit, and then a wonderful surprise. I'm so glad.
Me too.
Well, actually, I wanted to share this morning. I rarely experience bad surprises these days, and I haven't for quite a while. It's very infrequently that I'm caught off guard with negative or difficult circumstances. Now, before you get the idea that I've developed some revolutionary mindset or that I have some cognitive breakthrough that I'm about to share with you, I need to let you know it's a lot less admirable and evolved than that. So if you're looking for enlightenment, I would say to temper your expectations, which is my secret to never being surprised by inhumanity and ugliness and difficulty. I once had a pastor say to me, John, some of you may remember this, I've shared this with you personally. He said, John, do you know how and why a robin finds earthworms? He said, because that's what it looks for. He said that our expectations have a lot to do with how we perceive what happens. So given that, if you live your life looking for or expecting terrible things, you're rarely going to be shocked when terrible things happen. In fact, on the contrary, you will be elated simply by avoiding complete disaster and only having things partially fall apart. That will feel like a pleasant surprise. And that, friends, has been my secret. Expect disaster so that a mere tragedy will feel like an upgrade. Actually, I'm a mystic. I'm a pessimistic. My worldview, my theology has often been bad stuff is ahead. Now, my wife has called me a pessimist, and as I may have shared with you, I'm not fond of that term. I like to say that I'm a fierce realist. I am a hopeless pragmatist who believes in being prepared for the worst case scenario by operating as if the worst case scenario is a foregone conclusion, right? In matters of politics or current events or family gatherings, I often choose to anticipate the least desirable outcome so that I'm practically and emotionally prepared for when it all hits the fan. I started this practice the week before the 2016 elections. So let's just say it served me really well ever since. I've made great and constant use of this coping tactic. So for me, and I'm not proud to admit this, I am rather surprised now when disaster doesn't come, when things don't all fall apart, when it doesn't all hit the fan. Now you're all better people than me, so you don't experience this. You have hope in you at all times. You're always looking on the bright side, I know. Now I'm kidding a bit, though not as much as I wish I were kidding. Doing the work I do, I call myself a collector of stories, a war correspondent, because I travel through this world and I travel to new communities and I reach people online. And because of that, I am often the repository for bad news. I'm grateful for it, but people rarely reach out to me and say, it's an emergency, could you meet with me? I have to tell you something great that happened. It's usually about trauma or pain or sadness or grief or worry. But you experience this too, just being a caring human being, just being an activist, just being someone who cares about the world. You're aware of how much pain there is, and you have people around you who are similarly aware of it. So like me, you get texts that people send that say, oh, have you seen this? And you say, yes, I have actually, thank you. And it's 2 a.m, and yes, I'm still up worrying about the thing that you're talking about, right? Or they say, this story is horrible, you have to read it, right? So we have this negativity in us, it surrounds us, and we begin to traffic in it, to share it, to dwell upon it. And I think negativity and pessimism that develops in us it's a defense mechanism, right? It's built in, it's a way of coping with the transpiring of so many events that previously seemed unfathomable. to prepare our hearts for that which hearts cannot prepare for. Whether it was a morally bankrupt sea-level reality TV show president, or a planetary health crisis that shut down the planet and stole a complete year of our lives at least, an insurrection at our nation's capital, or the rolling back of the rights of women to have autonomy over their own bodies. I think our minds and our hearts are vulnerable, and they need protection from the existential trauma that we have all walked through recently. Seriously, I don't hope for terrible things, but if I did, there have been countless moments in the past few years that even if I genuinely expected the absolute worst that my mind could fathom, it felt worse than that when things actually did unfold. There's this little passage in Winnie the Pooh that I love. Eeyore and Pooh are talking with Christopher Robin. And Eeyore says, "It's snowing still." "So it is. And freezing. Is it?" Eeyore says, "Yes. However," he said, brightening up a little, "we haven't had an earthquake lately." I think Eeyore may be the patron saint of pessimisticism, right? And I imagine most of us in this room or watching online, if we're being honest, we have become slightly or substantially less optimistic than we once were. Maybe even than we'd been just a few years ago. Can you sense a change in you, in the outlook you have when you get up in the morning? I remember being buoyant, effervescent. I remember being bubbly. I remember not looking tired. A friend recently said to me, "John, you look tired today." I said, "Nope, not today. Look this way all the time now." I think, friends, there is a negative muscle memory that builds up. It's an emotional callus when you experience too many disappointments, too many simultaneous defeats, when you have circumstances or people let you down consistently. And so to avoid the impact of it all, we prophesy disaster as a preemptive strike. And really, I can remember an earlier version of myself who wasn't like that at all. I remember thinking that most people were inherently good. I remember believing political parties could be different, but that they sincerely wanted to work for the common good. I remember being proud to live in America. I remember expecting justice to prevail eventually. And as I look back on this previous incarnation of myself, I find myself wondering, was he wrong? Was he just sheltered and ignorant of the way the world worked? Was he in a bubble of selective information and privilege? Or has the world actually become less conducive to goodness? Has it become less likely to yield kindness? Has it become more violent and ugly? Or is knowing more the actual problem? The more aware that we become, are we in danger of becoming less optimistic? Does social media constantly set off alarms in us so that we're in a state of elevated urgency and alerted only to the worst things, and so we begin to dwell on only the worst things? Do the accumulated trauma and the editorializing about them cause us to see the world now with less possibility, with less expectancy, with less of a chance of it evolving? I think that's why so many decent people seem to have opted out of politics and avoided staying informed, because they know if they do, they'll have one foot in despair and one foot on a banana peel. Because to live in these days as an empathetic human being, it is treacherous business. And people know they'll have to face the challenges, they'll have to confront the ugliness. And you do that. That's probably why some days you don't feel as optimistic as you used to. We all have our eyes open. We've seen what's happening in Missouri, what's happening in Florida, what's happening in Texas, what's happening in Montana. We've seen what's happening in schools and to libraries, to the Supreme Court, to Congress. I understand why people opt out of caring. It's the same reason some of us expect the worst, because we're all terrified to face how bad it sometimes gets. And we're all grieving these surprise losses. So many things have happened to us over the past few years that were not expected and not pleasant. In the past few years, we've all lost something unexpectedly, someone we love who passed in the pandemic. We've lost a treasured relationship that has been severed by politics. We've lost our old story about God because of what religious people have done. We've lost our former image of country. We've lost the earlier mythology of our families. We've lost our belief in the goodness of people. We've lost our optimism about the future. We've lost the lightness we used to feel when we got up in the morning. And these have been terrible surprises. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said something that I was both frustrated by her and jealous of her. She said, I try to stay out of all that craziness in politics. She said, I just think people on both sides get too worked up over everything. I think we should just stop with all the social media posts and just all the protesting. We should just love each other. She expressed fatigue at her social media feed. She contemplated just turning it all off, she said. I could see in her eyes that she was genuinely exhausted. She was sincere in her grief by the divisions and the infighting. I could tell she decided not to enter into the fray of argument and activism. I know many people like my friend. They're otherwise decent, responsible, good-hearted human beings who don't realize how insulated they actually are from the kind of fear and threat that people of color are experiencing, that the LGBTQ community is experiencing, that Muslims or that women are beginning to experience once again here. And this insulation from that, or the perceived insulation from it, makes inaction tempting. We can't be tempted to stay out of the fray. I wonder if we're doomed to pessimism, or if we can operate differently. Can we together steward expectancy? Can we be caretakers of optimism? Or is that a thing of the past for us? Because I think a community like this exists precisely for that reason. Some of you may know that I went to a church in Center City a few years ago in the wake of the Parkland shooting. And I was there to grieve alongside people who were grieving and to mark another senseless destruction of life. And part of that gathering, it was led by middle and high school students. And they planned the event. They were handing out flowers, they made t-shirts and signs, and I told you that I remember feeling a counterintuitive joy because it was a memorial service, and yet I felt something hopeful in the way they were confronting this ugliness directly. And that day, young people, 15, 16, 17, spoke the messages, not adults. And one young man stepped out in front of us all, and he said, I just want you to know I'm happy to be here today. He said, I'm not happy because of why we gather. I'm happy because I woke up today looking for hope. And he said, and here you are. I think this is our mission in days when pessimism is so easy and so justifiable. You know, we've all heard and recited the phrase, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I wonder if we still believe that. Are we at least willing to show up and to try to make it true in our lifetime? People always say, John, I'm worried about what's going to happen to my children and my grandchildren or after I'm gone. The good news is that you're here. The optimism is in your proximity to pain and your agency to alleviate some of that pain. April 16th, 2023 is a day we've never been to, but you made it. Congratulations. You're going to be surprised with the beautiful and the terrible today. I love this quote by T.H. White. He says, "Life is such unutterable hell, solely because it is sometimes beautiful. If we could only be miserable all the time, if there could be no such things as love or beauty or faith or hope, if I could be absolutely certain that my love would never be returned, how much more simple life would be. One could plod through the Siberian salt mines of existence without being bothered about happiness. Unfortunately, the happiness is there. There is always the chance, about 850 to 1, that another heart will come to mine. I can't help hoping and keeping faith and loving beauty. Quite frequently, I am not so miserable as it would be wise to be." Friends, this life is many things. It's exhilarating, it's inspiring, it's disorienting, it's confounding, it's terrifying, but it is almost never predictable. We spend a great deal of time and energy in order to be in control, or at least convince ourselves that we are. And then life interrupts, and it reminds us just how precarious a position we're in and how very little we get to steer the ship. But if I can't steer the ship, I at least want to be the captain of my own heart. I want to be someone who lives differently than other people. I don't want to be conditioned to think the worst about people or about situations. I want to work to create a place where we will be surprised when ugliness shows up because it is so rare. I don't want to have to retire from optimism. I don't want to put my head in the sand, but I also don't want to become so jaded that I am incapable of looking for our better angels. When I look back on the days I planned over my life, the days that I anticipated, they didn't include burst water pipes. The plans didn't include a loved one's death. They didn't include a missed year or a tumor diagnosis or my son crashing the car. They were unexpectedly hit with adversity that I hadn't seen coming and hadn't planned for. And the days and the weeks and the months ahead will bring beautiful and terrible surprises, but we can actually plan for them. Who do you want to be? How do you want to be? What is the best version of yourself that you have? Plan on that. Because I know that whatever happens with the rest of this, I want to find gratitude. I want to be a helper. I want to be clear and courageous in the face of injustice. I want to practice compassion. So I'm going to use my daily planner now to decide not what I'm going to do or what is going to happen, but who I'm going to be, regardless of what I do or what unfolds. I think that's what being a person of faith and morality and conscience is. And I think that's the best aspiration or goal or prayer. To want to be in a place of gratitude, of empathy, of hope, no matter what happens around me. I want to be a person that doesn't allow miserable times and miserable people to make me miserable. And I want a world full of grieving, hurting people who are beginning to give up on humanity, to encounter my life and be surprised. Eugene O'Neill says, "I am so far from being a pessimist. On the contrary, in spite of my scars, I am tickled to death at life." That's the prayer. That's the hope. That is our aspiration. I want to be an optimist. I want that to be our theology. And I want that to be what the world experiences from us.